Welcome back to another edition of Between Two FARs. We have been talking with Michael Mark, one of our veteran procurement attorneys with over 40 years of federal procurement experience. And he's helping us to understand exactly what broad agency announcements are. Now, specifically today, we're going to take a look at NASA and the use of BAAs. Michael, what have we got going on here at NASA? How are we addressing broad agency announcements?
Well, we have two versions of them in two different parts of the NASA FAR Supplement. The first is in NASA FAR Supplement Part 1835, and that deals with the NASA research announcements. And at point 016-71, which you have up, that talks a little bit about what an NRA is, and it's a broad agency announcement. And typically the NRAs are used for situations where centers will not be proposing directly to do the work. They may be effectively subcontractors, and we have a process by which they can help proposers on these, but they're not going to propose directly. The other one is the announcement of opportunity, which is in NASA FAR Supplement 1872, and we'll get to that in a minute. And that's the one where a NASA center can propose on its own and may have its own subcontractors. So they're very similar in terms of what they are. They're these statements of here are our problems, here are the subtasks or the subtopics that we're looking for, submit a proposal, and then they have the evaluation criteria, which, as I pointed out in our previous session, are a little less directive than, say, what you might see in an RFP. They tend to deal with what is the intrinsic science. Is it science that we think will actually solve the problem? Does it have technical merit? Is it related to our mission? How successful do we think it's going to be? And then we always have to look at cost. Is this something that we think could be done within those costs? Are the costs reasonable? Do we think that any cost sharing that's involved will be done properly? And that's one of the things that the NASA announcements often have. They require cost sharing because we're unusual in that we often are using these as a fixed price contract. The NRAs, I think less so, they're more often cost type, but under the STED announcements, under AOs and whatnot, those tend to be, and they're often NRAs as well, they want them as fixed price documents. And we talked a little bit about the problems that causes. And the biggest one is if we're requiring cost sharing, companies like to use their independent research and development accounts, IR&D, as their cost share, but under the cost principles, you can't do that on a contract, at least on a cost type contract. And if you use cost analysis to come up with the price on a fixed price contract, then the cost principles also apply, and that's been a problem for some of those. So that's an issue that we have. But typically what we see is again, they're peer reviewed, they create these orders of merit, and they put together a presentation to the SSA, who then says, okay, we're going to pick, the first three because that's the amount of funding I have, and those are the ones that I think have the best chance of success. It is possible that there aren't enough to exhaust the budget in that area, and so they may reallocate the budget. That may be that there weren't many that had enough merit that we felt they were worth spending the money on, so we'll move that money to another topic where maybe there were more proposals and we really like some of them. And again, these are research projects, so what's going to come out of it in the end? Well, we're not sure. That's why it's research. We're hoping that it will move the meter forward with regard to whatever the problem is, and then the STED ones are much more specific because they are actually asking us to solve specific problems and come up with designs and prototypes of things that we could theoretically use in space. So things like in-space assembly, in-situ resource utilization, dust mitigation I've seen, things of that sort. And the NASA FAR supplement is unusual in that in the Air Force, when I was involved with these things, we selected for award, and there was already a model contract that they were going to work from. In NASA, we don't have that model contract. We select for award, and then we negotiate the contract. And that has yielded some difficulties from time to time as well. And the other problem that I often see when I'm doing these is there was no statement of work in the solicitation, just a statement of the problem and what we're looking for. The offerors are supposed to come up with a statement of work, and sometimes they do, but often they don't, or if they do, it's so cursory as not to be useful. So our people will then try to put together a statement of work. And when I say, well, okay, show me the proposal, and I look at the proposal and I cannot correlate what's in the statement of work with what's in the proposal. And we got to fix that. You know, we can't do something that, well, theoretically, we can't do something that wasn't in the proposal. The other unusual thing that NASA does is we say we will buy all, some, or part of your proposal, or we will negotiate changes to your proposal to accommodate what it is we really want. And that's a part that can give everybody a lot of pause. You know, are we getting too far afield from what we asked for in the first place? In other words, this was not reasonably within the contemplation of the parties. It's out of scope. It's a new source selection. And if you get a protest like that, you're probably going to lose it.
So these can be taken to the GAO for bid protest if an unsuccessful offerer feels that we have stepped outside of the bounds of the original broad agency announcement?
Yes, and they can also protest their non-selection. We didn't evaluate it to say the way we said we did, or there was a conflict of interest among the evaluators. They had it out for me. That's not an uncommon allegation. It's also hard to prove. Yeah. And then when I was in the Air Force, we had one of these where unfortunately in the debrief, they said, you were this close, and they protested. And they lost the protest, but one of the rules in debriefs is you don't say you missed it by just that little bit. You know, it's here's what we found and here's how you can improve in the future. So we're not there to make them feel good. We're there to tell them this is what we found and these are the things that you can do better in the future. In the broad agency announcements, it's a little harder to debrief. And I've also had issues where we don't have the non-selects proposals or the evaluations. And they delegate the awards down to the center. So they say, okay, and by the way, you debrief the non-selects. We're going, we have no insight. You got to send us that stuff. At least we could try and put something together. And sometimes they say, no, we're not sending it. And we're going, well, in that case, there's nothing we can do. So that becomes a challenge.
The debriefs are difficult, I've found, because a lot of times these proposals are made from a conglomerate of individuals and institutions, universities, businesses. And I had a debriefing once that was literally, well, almost literally, a cast of thousands. They did not limit the number of people who could call into this debriefing. And when the government got online, they were surprised to find, I think there were over 30 call-in lines. And at the end, the individual said, does anybody have any questions? And turned it over. It was a very long debriefing. We were definitely managing what seemed to be kind of a circus there. So yes, these BAAs, they're a unique animal, aren't they? They've got a lot of unique aspects you've got to keep in mind as you're walking through the process.
And we need to keep the people in line and say, go back to that solicitation. This is what you said you were going to do. This is what you've got to do. And yeah, it's broader than what you would typically see in an RFP, but it's not unlimited. And sometimes I've had some where I recently had one where we made an award. It was dollar limited because of the solicitation. They said, but we really want to buy that other stuff. Well, okay, you're going to have to do a JOFOC, and they did that. And then they came back and said, oh, they proposed something on an earlier AO. We'd like to do that one too. And I'm going, wait a minute, that wasn't even part of this one. How are you going to support that? So you can get into these situations where you have scope creep, and that's another danger that you can see. So BAAs are very useful because we don't know what we want, and people can try and tell us what we want, and we say, yeah, that looks good. But the parties may still not really know what they want, and so it becomes really fluid, and that's one of the challenges of that process.
Well, you've heard it here, guys. Listen to Michael Mark and keep coloring in between the lines. We'll see you again next time. Between Two FARs. Poor dog. I feel like he's like the sacrifice animal for today's Between Two Fars. Thou shalt be washed so that it will be silent in the house.
Cleanest
Okay.
dog in years, right?
And I think at least 4 of the children are outside with the wet dog, so we should be okay for a little while. This may be a quieter one. I've got the dog lying down, one kid taking a shower because apparently washing the dog required him to be washed, and then the 3 girls are outside. So hopefully it'll be quieter this time.
Okay.
All right.